Hi everybody and welcome. My name is Luke and this is The Science Lens, where I show you how science can improve your critical thinking skills. Today's episode is about finding reliable resources. In today's episode, I'm doing something a little different. My first set of videos was all about overcoming biases and fallacies, and a common piece of advice that I gave in those was to seek out reliable data. Now, after I posted those videos, a question that I heard from some people was, how do I go about finding those reliable sources of information? Now, in my household, I'm not actually the most qualified person to talk about this topic, and so today I'm enlisting the help of my lovely and talented wife, Jen, who's not only a professional writer, but has taught journalism for many years, so she has a lot of experience with fact-checking and considering the reliability of sources. So I hope you enjoy my interview with her. So Jen, welcome to The Science Lens. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So Jen, I know about your work and I know how much research and fact-checking is involved. So can you just start by talking a little bit about that process?
Sure. Obviously, it depends what type of article I'm writing, but I basically want to start by just basic Googling, Wikipedia, try to understand the basic or contextual knowledge of the topic. Then that will typically lead me to a list of experts that I would want to reach out to as primary sources to interview them and get some reliable information. From there, a lot of times what they tell me, I'll want to go a little bit deeper. And so I'll do Google Scholar or try to find reliable sources like maybe the New York Times or maybe a book that they had referenced in our interview. I'll go there, understand a little bit more, and then most likely I'll probably return to the primary source if they have the time and have them answer some of my follow-up questions.
So in this process, what are some things that you look for that might be red flags, that sort of tell you that the information you're looking at might not be that reliable?
Probably the first thing, most common thing, is sensationalistic language with the headlines. So if it's like shocking information or using adjectives that kind of evokes an emotional response, that's kind of a red flag for me because I know that the writer is either making something a bit clickbaity for me to enter in the article, or it's heavily biased. So I want to avoid that, and I want to find information that's presented in a non-biased way.
So you were a journalism teacher for quite a while. Can you tell me, is there one mistake that you would always see students making when it came to researching information?
Yeah, sure. Probably the biggest mistake is rushing through that research process and Googling something and then just choosing the first search result that pops up. Sometimes even choosing sponsored content, because that's always what appears first. Or maybe going to something that has just lived online for a long time, and that's why it's one of the top search results. So biggest mistake is just rushing and not reading multiple sources to kind of corroborate that information that they're finding.
So sometimes we can't help but rush through the information that we're presented with because we get so much of it every day, in the news, in our social media posts and that sort of thing. So, what advice would you give to somebody who's thinking to themselves at the moment, I just don't have the time to thoroughly investigate every story that I see?
I think the best way to go is just choose a couple reliable sources that you know are reliable and you go back to those over and over. So a nice resource that I like to use is allsides.com. They have a media bias infographic that I like to show students, and it shows all of the major media corporations, and they have them listed from left to right, so politically leaning in the States, liberal to conservative, which is a pretty good gauge to find out if you choose that center, that's going to be a little bit more non-biased reporting, and that's what I typically like to go for. Or if I go for maybe a slight left leaning, I also want to choose a slight right leaning just so I'm getting, to see if the same information is being presented.
To figure out if it's balanced or even to get both sides of the story.
Right, exactly. And I think that's so important so that we don't fall victim to confirmation bias and we're just kind of seeing what we want to see.
Now, I mentioned social media. And it is playing more and more of a role in how people are sort of exposed to the news these days. So what advice do you have for people that want to make sure that the information they see on social media is reliable?
That's a really important question because most of us at least get some of our news from social media these days. The first thing that you want to pay attention to is who is sharing the information that you're seeing and where is it actually coming from. So I see a lot of headlines in my Insta stories, for example, but oftentimes it's just a headline, and I know that a lot of people share those headlines without actually reading the story. So the first thing you want to do is pay attention to that headline. Is it sensational? Is it evoking a strong emotion? Because that's typically what we share. So I want to pause for a moment, and then actually, if it's something that actually made me emotional or I care about, I want to pause, get out of the app, and actually read that story before I share myself. The second thing is social media can actually be a great source to find really good news. So for example, if you want to know what's going on in a war-torn country like Ukraine right now, follow some of the journalists that are on the ground. They actually have social media accounts where they're reporting live from the action. That's going to be really reputable. Another thing is maybe you want to follow, for example, during the pandemic, I followed quite a few scientists and immunologists who I checked their credentials, so I made sure that they were credible sources, and then I followed them so they could kind of break down the news for me because I'm not an expert. So those are my top 2 tips for social media.
Great. And do you have any final thoughts or pieces of advice that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that you don't need to know everything about everything. So what I like to do is I like to get a daily newsletter. I get mine from the New York Times, which kind of breaks down the top global news stories, so I kind of know what's going on. The other thing that I would really like people to know is the importance of supporting local journalism. So if you're in a privileged position to support local news by subscribing to a local newspaper, please do it. Local journalism is dying, and this means that most of the information that we're seeing is all the same. So it's all this global information, and then we're missing out on these really heartwarming human interest pieces, or maybe really important stories about local crime that's going on or political issues that you really don't know about. And so what that's doing is a lot of the same information is just kind of being circulated with different biases or slants. So we're missing really important information, and we're missing out on quality journalism.
Well, that's it from us for today, but if you'd like some resources to help you either teach or learn critical thinking, I recommend that you check out my store on Teachers Pay Teachers. That's linked down in the description below. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos on how science can improve your critical thinking skills. But for now, that's it from me.
Thanks for watching.
That's my line.
Oh, sorry.